Thanks for joining us for the Chronological Bible Study. Beth put together some Facebook posts and we sent it out. We were excited about doing this Chronological Bible Study. This is the second time we've done it, and people started replying to us and saying, hey, I'd like to do this with you. The first time we did this, it was part of a year-long Sunday school class at our local church. We would do a reading for that week, and then I would teach a class at the end of the week. So what we're doing now is we're trying to put these classes on the internet so that you guys can be part of the whole thing, not just read along with us, but you can actually be part of the classes as they come out. Right now there's probably going to be 53 because this first class is going to set as an introductory class to the rest of them before we start cutting the actual material. Maybe your parents gave you a Bible, or maybe you got one from church. It's divided up in a certain way. The Bible is set up in specific sections or topics. What this Bible does, the Chronological Bible, it takes it out of that order and it puts it in the order of the events that actually happened. Okay, so we start all the way back at creation and we end up in the prophecy of Revelation, the same place that the normal order is, but all the stuff in between happened in the order of events that actually happened from Genesis all the way to our future and the end of Revelation. So we're using two materials for this class in addition to some handouts. Now if you're on Facebook and you're part of the class, please reach out to me and Beth. We have the handouts, we'll send them to you. Some of them we can't show on YouTube, so we're going to actually send them out to you so that you can see them and you have them for reference. So when we reference them in this class, I'll be referencing 3 of them today. You can reference those handouts. I'll tell you when to look at each one. Handout 1, 2, and 3 is what we'll be using today. Okay. In addition to those handouts, we're using 2 books. Okay. So the first book is the Year Chronological Study Bible. So this is our first actual book reference. Now I know some of you have probably already ordered it and it may or may not have gotten in the mail. It's really easy. We're going to go over how to use it here in a minute. But this is your first one. This is the actual Bible we're going to be reading throughout the year. All right, all the way up to December 31st this year. And then the other one is one I'm just going to use here in class for you to reference to kind of put everything in a chronological time frame so that you can understand what's going on in the rest of the world, how the order of events happened. Okay, and this is the wall chart of world history. This is a book that was given to my son actually back in 2011. I actually didn't use it. It was a really interesting thing, but I didn't actually use it until 2 years ago when I taught the class. And it's pretty amazing. Everything kind of matches up with this old book and the order of events that are in the Chronological Bible. So those are the 2 materials we'll be using. So let's get to our regular order of our Bible. Okay, so you probably have a regular Bible at home. That's the one that I was referencing earlier. It's split up into different sections. So if you look at handout number 1, okay, that's the one that says Books of the Bible at the top of it. You'll see that all the books of the Bible there are listed. All right, from Genesis all the way to Revelation. They're all listed in there. Okay. And it's divided up. The left column says Old Testament and the right column says New Testament. Alright? So over there, we'll start on the left. This is the normal way that the Bible is divided. The Protestant Bible is divided up. Okay? The Catholic Bible's got more books in it than the Protestant Bible does. So you should have a Protestant Bible that you're looking at so you can understand the order. Okay? So the first 5 books of our Old Testament, so if you flip all the way to the beginning of your regular Bible, the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that's what's called the Torah, okay? In Greek, the Pentateuch, something like that, okay? So that's what's known as the law, okay? So you have those first 5 books, all right? And down below that, look on your handout there. The next one down is the history section. So you have the first 5 books is the law. The next section is history. And that is Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Okay, those are all historical books that are in your regular Bible. Okay, the next section is a poetry section. Okay, you got Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. You've got all those books in there in the next section of your regular Bible. So if you can just open up your Bible to like the table of contents and you can see that This is the order of the books that's in your table of contents in your regular Bible. Okay, and you can see how they're divided up into sections. You got law, history, and poetry so far. The next section is what we call the major prophets. They're called major prophets just simply because the books are longer. They're books written by prophets who are longer. They're longer books. Okay, so they're the major prophets. That's Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Okay, and then after that, in the next section, you have the minor prophets. Minor prophets are Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Okay, those are your minor prophets. And Malachi is the last book of the Protestant Old Testament. So if you got a King James or a New King James Bible or even an LSB Bible at home, you see that it's divided up into those books in that order into those sections. That's why those books are in that order. They have been divided by the church fathers way back when they put the Bible together. They put them into those sections. So that's the Old Testament. Now over to the New Testament. You start off the New Testament with the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, so those are the four Gospels. Those are the four tellings of the events of Jesus as witnessed by the Gospel writers. The next book over in the New Testament is the book of Acts, which is a history book that actually tells us the history of the church, when the church was set up. After the ascension of Jesus in the first part of Acts, the disciples, they go about setting up the church. And that's the church that our foundation, even today, our churches today are built on, is built on the church that was stood up there in that historical book of Acts. Now after that, you've got Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st, 2nd Thessalonians, 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st, 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd John, 3rd John, Jude. Those are all what we call the epistles or letters. Okay, epistle is just it's like the word for letters. So these are actual letters written by those people that were in that church, that first church, and those disciples of the people that started that first church. This is the letters written to other folks and the letters written by those folks. Okay, and that tells us a lot about what Jesus' teaching was, because they expound on them. A lot of these guys like John and Paul, you can't say they were just retelling the things that Jesus said. They were also receiving divine revelation and writing it down and then sending that to other people in these epistles or letters. Okay, and our last book, if you're in your regular Bible, their last book is Revelation. Okay, and Revelation is a book of prophecy about things that probably did happen and some things that are still going to happen in the future. So now those are all the sections of your regular Bible. That's not the Bible we're going to use for this class. I just wanted you to know the order and why your regular Bible that you have is divided up the way that it is. It's not in chronological order. It's not in from beginning to end. Okay, it's divided up into different sections, and I hope you get that by use of that handout number 1 there. This class we're going to use a chronological Bible. So what this does, instead of putting it in that order, law, history, poetry, major, minor prophets, gospels, history, letters, what it does is it puts it in the order that where those things actually occurred. Okay, so let's say when Paul was on one of his missionary journeys around the Mediterranean and he wrote a letter to something, you see that he was on that missionary journey in the book of Acts. But while he was on that missionary journey in the book of Acts, he writes a letter and they place that letter in there in that time frame. So as things were happening, they are put in here. So it helps you get a better knowledge of God's whole plan for humanity, His plan for creation. So there's the book. It's in time order, not topical. And this book is divided up into 14 eras. And you can look here at the bottom of any of your pages here. These 14 eras go across the bottom. And the one that is is colored in is the era in which it is. Okay, so you've got the creation era, which is part of creation, the book of Genesis. You got the patriarch era, okay, and then you've got the Exodus, all right, Moses and how he leads the people out, that era. Then you have the conquest era where Joshua leads the people in to the promised land. You've got the Judges era where they've sat up there and now the third generation is taken over and God has to raise up judges to remind them over and over of His plan for them and that they need to obey Him. And the next era you have is the kingdom era. That's when David and Solomon, his son, set up the great kingdom, the united kingdom of Israel when it was all together. After that period, Solomon's son comes to power, and because he doesn't obey the rules, the kingdom splits up into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. Next, after that, you have the captivity, Persia. Then you have the silent era. Silent era is those periods that are between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So if you look there at the bottom page of your book, one of your Bibles, of your chronological Bible, you'll see that there's a silent era period. Everything to the left of that is Old Testament. Everything to the right of the silent era is the New Testament. Okay, after the silent period or silent era, you have the gospel, which is the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then you have the church era, okay, which is the book of Acts. And then you have the missions era, which are the epistles when they're all traveling around. And then you've got the last era, which is the era of the end and new beginning. And that is where we're going to finish up and you will fully understand God's creation, God's plan for creation, not just humankind, but all of creation. So what's the difference between our regular Bible and our chronological Bible? So our chronological Bible allows us to read like a story. You probably picked up a storybook when you were a kid and you read a story. You can count on it being in the right order. Okay? You couldn't always count on that with your regular Bible because it's not in order. It's in the order of those sections that we talked about before. This Bible, the chronological study Bible that we're using this year, is in that order. So it reads like a story from beginning to end. So when we're reading Scripture, you need to keep three things in mind. You need to think about who is speaking right now. So if we're reading the book of Exodus, we're in the time of Exodus, the era of Exodus that we just went over the 14 eras of. Most likely the speaker will be God or Moses. And you need to dig in there to see who is saying this. Is this God saying this? Or is this Moses who wrote the book saying this? Is this Miriam when she sings her song or when she talks to Moses that is saying this? Is this his brother Aaron speaking? So we need to know who is talking. You need to know who they're talking to. A lot of times Moses is talking in the book of Exodus. Moses is talking to all the Israelites. Sometimes he's talking just to his brother Aaron. Sometimes he's talking to specific groups. Sometimes God's speaking to Moses. So you need to know who is speaking, who they're speaking to, and then the context of the situation. So you can't just read it. A lot of people will try to read the Bible as if it's speaking to them. And it is to some degree, okay? But you take it out of context when you are trying to apply it to you. Because who wrote the book? We'll stay in Exodus. Who wrote the book? Moses wrote the book of Exodus, okay? So Moses wasn't writing it to you in the 21st century, although it is useful to us now in the 21st century, right? It's useful for our interest. However, Moses was writing the book so that people could understand their history. When he was standing on the mountainside and Joshua and the Israelites were about to cross the river Jordan over to invade Jericho, he wrote all this down so that those people would understand their history. So they would have a piece of their history written down. Okay, so keep that in the context. Keep that in context as you're reading. Who is speaking? Who are they speaking to? And what's the context of that situation? What's the context of that passage? Open your chronological study Bible. Go to pages 2 and 3. So what I'm going to do now is explain to you the concept of horizontal and vertical books. Now remember a while ago when I was talking about the chronological Bible puts things in the order they actually happen. Okay? Now you can see here, these books across the middle line here, these are what we would call horizontal books. Okay? Horizontal books are books that actually time moves along with. So during the time of Genesis, time is actually ticking away. Tick, 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 tick. During the book of Exodus, time is ticking away. All the way over here through Nehemiah. That's where time is actually moving. Okay? Now, during the book of Genesis, the book of Job occurs. So Job happens during the time of Genesis. That's what all of these books down here, these are the vertical books. So horizontal books move time, and vertical books interject during those time periods. Okay? And also you've got the prophetic books up here. Okay? That happen during these specific times. So you want to know, if you want to reflect, you're reading in Ezra and you're like, okay, I forgot what was going on here. What's going on at that time? Okay, you can flip back to this chart on pages 2 and 3. You can see, okay, this is after the 70-year captivity, and the book of Esther occurs during the time of Ezra. Okay, and the prophets that were around during that time, this is during the return era, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Joel. Okay, all these prophets were hanging around at the same time the book of Ezra was written and Nehemiah was written here as time was moving forward. So that is a useful tool. Horizontal books, vertical books. Horizontal books move time along. Vertical books interject occasions during that time. Okay? Now, let's talk about translation real quick. This is the NLT, or the New Living Translation. Okay? Now, if you've got another handout there, it's called handout number 2. It's the one that says Bible Translation Chart at the top. Okay? Now, you can see to the left of that chart, you've got Bible translations that are translated word for word. Okay, so the translators were biblical scholars, men and women who are dedicated to an accurate translation of the Bible. They're going word for word, and they're going back to the original Hebrew. They're going back to the original Greek, the original Aramaic that the Bible was written in, and they are translating it then into our language. You got word for word on the left, where they actually went through and translated it word for word. And then on the far right, you have where these are translations where they've actually paraphrased it. So they took John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. They took that and they paraphrased it. Instead of it being a word-for-word translation from the original Greek, they took that and they paraphrased it into something else. This Bible that we're using is the New Living Translation. And if you're looking at that chart that we sent out to you, you see that the New Living Translation is over there on the right side of that spectrum, in between thought for thought and paraphrasing. Okay, you see to the far right of that is the Message, and if you ever read the Message, it's a very loose. So they just kind of take the idea and they throw it into modern language, basically, with the Message, and that's kind of where the New Living Translation, the Living Translation, gets updated from time to time as language changes. So does the translation. Okay, now on the opposite side of the spectrum, I'm kind of partial to the New King James Version. You see that's over there on the word for word side. And if you can go further to the left there, you see the New American Standard Bible. That's pretty word for word. And you got the LSB, which is a more recent translation, the Legacy Standard Bible. Our chronological study Bible that we're using is more of a paraphrase or thought for thought translation. Okay, so if you're wondering the difference in translations, that's all it is. Okay, there's not a whole lot to that. I know that a lot of people want to say that, you know, the Bible translation throws the meaning of the Bible off and all that kind of stuff. All it is somebody translated in a thought, translating it per thought, or are they translating it word for word? Okay, so don't get wrapped up in all that stuff. This version that we're using is NLT. Okay, if I was really going to study the Bible, I would use a word for word translation. Okay, if I was really going to and dig into like the Greek and the Hebrew. Okay, well, what does this word mean in Hebrew? What does this word mean in Greek? I would be using more of a word-for-word translation like King James or LSB, something like that. But for the purpose of this study, we're trying to understand God's whole plan and put it in chronological order as it is in the Bible. We can get by with just doing a thought by thought or more of a paraphrase kind of translation, okay? Because we're trying to understand the big picture in this story. We're not trying to just understand the word for word part of it. If you really want to get into the weeds on Scripture, you really want to get into the weeds on understanding what this specific verse means, go to a word-for-word translation, not a thought-for-thought translation. Let's talk about how we understand, how we should interpret the Bible during this study. Okay, this is called hermeneutics. Okay, so the hermeneutic, or the way to interpret our Bible through this. Remember, I talked about three things. We need to know who's talking, who they're talking to, and the context of the situation. But you also need to try not make something exist that isn't there. Okay? People have a habit when they read the Bible, they want to make a specific phrase apply to them or make it match up with whatever they're thinking. And that's not how the Bible was written. The Bible was written by people who were writing to another specific group of people. Okay? And it had a specific purpose and a specific message. It was supposed to be transmitted from one group of people or one person to another person. Okay, so don't interject your own thoughts or your own plans into the Bible. Okay, let the Bible speak to you. Okay, and that's called using a literal. Okay, so we read the things literally, not like if Jesus says he's a door, he's an actual door, not like that literally, but you take things as if they literally happen. They're literally saying that. They literally mean what they're saying, because these are people actually talking to other literal people. Okay, literally, grammatically. So we want to look at how is the grammar structured? Okay, how was it structured back then? And now historically. Now this is a historical study. This is the whole purpose of doing a chronological study, is we're trying to get a grasp of how does this all fit into our history as human beings? How does the Bible fit in there? So literal, hermeneutical, literal, not fitting your own thoughts in there, not making the Bible say what you want it to say. Read it as what it actually says. Grammatical, let the language speak for itself. And historical, how do we put this in a historical context? Okay, who was at power? Was the Persians in power right now? Were the Romans in power? Were the Babylonians in power? Were the Egyptians the ones that were ruling right now? So each one of those civilizations comes with its own history, its own social norms and all that kind of stuff, and that'll help you put things in perspective, okay? And we'll get into that in class. Now we're going to move over to our second book reference that we have for this class. This is the Wall Chart of World History. So I know there's a lot of turmoil over how old the earth is. And I'm not here to debate that with you. But for the purpose of this class, we're going to take it for granted that the earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Okay? If you believe that the earth is 10 million years old, okay, so be it. I'm not going to argue that point with you. However, for the purpose of this class and understanding how it fits into our history, we're going to say that the earth is about 6,000 years old. You're probably thinking to yourself about carbon dating and all that stuff. Just know that the carbon dating is not absolute, and the further you go into history from 2,000, 3,000 year range, the more chances there are of there being mistakes in the dating. That's the fact of it. This book is what we're going to use as we move forward in chronological history. It takes us from creation, marked here with this paper clip, through the family line, coming out from originally with Adam and Eve, all the way through all these genealogies. You probably already read them, and that genealogy is going to take us all the way over there to the 12 tribes, and Moses coming out of that. And that's where the genealogy ends. But at the same time, this also adds in biblical history into our secular history. So you can see right here, if I open that up, there's the Tower of Babel. Okay? where does the Tower of Babel fit in with our history that we're taught in schools, right? So this book takes that into account and actually puts those biblical things and also the lifespans of the people that are in the Bible, takes it into account as they are moving through time. Okay, this book ends. There's the crucifixion of Jesus. This book ends over in like 1980 or something like that. Where's it end? Yeah, 1985, 1990. Okay. So we'll get into this book a little bit further as we go along and how to use it. Right now, we're just going to go very generally through a couple of pivotal moments in our first couple weeks of reading. This paperclip was marked as creation. So this is when God spoke the world into existence in Genesis chapter 1. Okay, so this is where creation happens. All right, and now we have Adam and we have Seth. Okay, out of Seth, we follow Seth's line on. And eventually we come to Noah. Okay, we have Methuselah, we have Noah. Noah is born, goes forth. Okay, Noah has 3 sons, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. And we get to this paperclip. This paperclip signifies the flood. Okay, so we have the flood. Shortly after that, we have the Tower of Babel. Coming out of the Tower of Babel, we're going to continue to follow the line of Shem. So after Noah, we follow the line of Shem, and we come into Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, Terah, right? And then finally we get to Abraham. Right? And if you read the first week of the reading already, you're already at Abraham. You've already been introduced to Abraham. Abraham's going to have a son named Isaac. Isaac's going to have a son named Jacob. And then Jacob's going to have 12 sons, which is where the 12 tribes of Israel come from.
Yes. One more.
After that, you go into the Judges era, and then you go into the Kingdom era, and then we'll just continue going through that as we go through our study. Okay? But this is a key. If I was to open this up, this is about like 20 feet long from creation all the way to 1990. All right? In Genesis, we get the actual lifespans of the people that lived here. We know if you've ever read the Bible before, you probably read that they lived a really, really long time back then. Okay, so in Genesis 5, chapter 5, verses 1 through 32, you have the line from Adam to Noah. You have all their years that they're born. Genesis chapter 11, verses 10 to 26, you have the years of Shem to Abram. And then you have in Genesis chapter 12, you have pretty much the rest of Genesis. You have all of the years of Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and then finally Judah. And why do we end with Judah? King David descends from, Solomon descends from, and finally Jesus descends from the tribe of Judah. Okay, and there's prophecy about that way back even in the Old Testament. So we're talking about Jesus in the New Testament, but even in the Old Testament there's prophecy telling us that Jesus is going to come from the tribe of Judah. So if we take all of those lifespans that are given to us in Genesis and we calculate them up, it gives us dates. So if you go to handout number 3, if you start there with the year 2000 and we take that as 0 and you count back to the left, you can see all those events take place, all those people live, and you end up 6,000 years in history. During our creation era and our patriarchal era, we're going to cover about 2,000 years of history. Just like that within the first couple weeks. That handout, it shows you very, very nicely over there on the far left the lifespans of all those people and how they intersect with actual timelines, how they intersect with actual dates of time. All right. Our goal for this is to do a 52-week study, and we're going to post a video every week. We're going to post it by Wednesday. All right, so you can do your reading for 6 days and then count on the video there talking about the material you just read on the 6th day, okay, which will be a Wednesday. So if you have any questions or anything, just text me on Facebook and we'll go through that. This is just the introduction for the class, introducing you to the materials, the Bible. All right, thank you. Have a good one.